You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
Welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. The Lubbock City Council will now hear arguments in the case of an apartment complex proposed where the Godbold Community Center now stands. This is the second application by the same company in just a few months to build there. Tech Terrace neighbors are mostly against it, fearing overcrowding with 600 more people living in an already congested area. They filed a motion to dismiss the application with Planning and Zoning 2 weeks ago on the grounds that the company needed to wait a year before filing again. On Thursday night, P&Z voted to send the case to council. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz introduced a bill last week we've seen from him before, term limits for senators, no more than 2 6-year terms. This on the heels of his November announcement that he plans to run for a third term himself. The bill would amend the Constitution to limit U.S. senators from serving more than 12 years and U.S. representatives from serving more than 3 2-year terms. If it's passed, terms served before it's enacted wouldn't count toward the limit, so Cruz could theoretically serve 2 more terms. And Governor Abbott voiced his support for school choice as part of his initiative to support parental rights. It happened during remarks he made at an event in Corpus Christi this week. Other top Texas lawmakers signaled they believe school choice legislation will pass this session. Abbott talked about a statewide education savings account program. It's the first time he has specifically talked about what he supports in terms of school choice legislation. Well, and here with us now is someone who is not a stranger to the legislative session, but certainly has his work cut out for him today. Thank you for being here, Representative Dustin Burrows.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Certainly, and we didn't really get to check in with you right before the session, so I wouldn't say we're in full swing, but the gavel has officially dropped. So maybe we start with something that you want to talk about first, and that's Texas Tech. We've got a lot of money that we keep talking about. There's not anything to do with it. You say Texas Tech has their hand on some of it.
Well, this is a really exciting problem that we have. Texas' economy has been hot. I think it's because of the conservative governance that we have, had. So because of severance tax and sales tax, we have the record historic surplus. Now, at least half of that, if not more, is going to be returned to property taxpayers. But others have some really great ideas. And one of those is there's a $2.5 billion set aside right now for research, which is primarily going to benefit Texas Tech University and University of Houston. I think there's going to be some more money coming into that fund, but certainly a really great opportunity for all of the research endeavors at Tech, which focuses on things so important to us like energy and agriculture and food and fuel and all the things we really care about. So I'm very excited to see that in the base budget and very excited about the potential for that going forward this session.
We know that Texas Tech in the last year has gotten a lot of money for research, so this just continues to pour into those programs, and that's really exciting for folks around here. Now, another piece of legislation that has your name on it, actually, that seeks to spend some money. I don't know if that comes from the surplus or from a different fund, but you've filed a bill now that is talking about a law enforcement accreditation program. Can you talk with me a little bit about that? Because that is state dollars going toward local policing, and we've seen the opposite recently.
Well, look, last summer I was chairing the committee that investigated what happened in Uvalde, and I walked away thinking the law enforcement response was horrific and catastrophic. It started researching just the number of law enforcement agencies we have here in the state of Texas, and California has 20 million more people, but yet Texas has 3 to 5 times the number of law enforcement agencies. We just clearly have, probably too many out here in the state, and we're not making sure they're actually accredited and doing the things they need to be doing. So I'm working with Senator Phil King. He's a former police officer, and we've come up with this idea that every law enforcement agency needs accreditation. And we're going to help support them to get that, but it's also going to force, probably some consolidation where it needs to be. And we think that's a very good thing, very healthy, and have a lot of support from law enforcement and the major associations backing us on this bill.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that this cannot have been an easy summer for you, chairing that committee. I mean, we saw you on national screens all over the country talking about this. Can we expect any other legislation from you resulting from that specific investigation? I know it had to personally affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. I came away thinking there was a lot of different reforms that are needed. And so obviously we talked about the law enforcement piece. There's also going to be a school hardening and school safety component. And I've been working on that legislation. It's not where I want it to be today for filing, but I'm hopeful in the next week or two I'm going to get a final product, and obviously look forward to sharing that with the people back home across the state, and the schools and everybody else, because I think there's a lot of work that can be done to benefit and keep our children safer.
Well, you certainly have a great perspective on that after looking so closely at that horrific day. And thank you for working so hard on that. Let's switch gears now to legislation that's been filed in the last few weeks. So you're definitely hard at work for sure, filing and writing and all of that. A COVID vaccine study. Now there's some wording in there that I thought was particularly interesting. This is a study for the effects of the COVID vaccine, if I'm not mistaken, and it says to see if there's a misrepresentation or of effectiveness or danger. I thought that was an interesting term.
Well, there's so many families that I've spoken to who either are still struggling to get the first round of vaccines or even get boosters. And there seems to be more and more information coming out. And quite frankly, I think there's a loss of trust and confidence at the federal level with the CDC and FDA and all of those. And so I want Texas to do this. I want Texas to look through this and see, what's really going on, talk to what we can find out about the manufacturers and whether or not they knew things and concealed them from this, and get this out public sphere. Actually, the day after Senator Springer and I filed this bill, the CDC came out and said there was a new linkage to adult strokes. And so, we're starting to find things out daily. And I think that it's time to, do our own study and try to, get this information out to the public so they can make their own informed decisions about what they want to do for themselves and their families.
And does this bill specify money-wise? Are we taking out of that surplus again, or is it out of the Health and Human Services Fund? Where is that coming from?
So we're going to work with the state agencies and talk about the resources that they need to be able to do this. And, they may be able to do this currently under their own capacity, but they may need some additional research and dollars to come in. And so we're going to have that conversation. And, when we get the bills to committee, they come with what's called a fiscal note. And so we'll find out, what the cost would be. But certainly, the public health and the fact that this has been mandated, by a lot of different groups, I think it's very important that we have good research and people can base upon and really get to the truth and make their own personal family decisions following the science.
Well, that's a great segue into our right to make personal decisions. There was a resolution that you filed that I thought was interesting as well, and it's the fundamental right of parents to raise children. Can you tell me where this comes from? Because when you read it, it doesn't seem like it's inspired by anything, but is it?
Well, so there's a lot of case law out there, and as we know, case law can change. But we know that parents have the fundamental right to determine their children's education, their health care, and things of that nature. And we want to codify that in the Texas Constitution to make sure that we put parents first in these important decisions. And I think it's really kind of a proactive step and step forward to make sure that we enshrine that very important right and basically speak to who it's at. So something that I've worked and talked to many other people about, and we think it's very important to deserve constitutional protections.
I appreciate that. And is there something that you want to come from that specifically? A resolution is different from a bill in a variety of ways, but what's your end goal with that particular piece?
So this resolution would actually be a constitutional amendment. So it would actually change the Texas Constitution. And right now, if you read the Texas Constitution, it does not talk about parental rights. Those all stem either from statute or case law or things like that. Well, I think parents' rights are so important. We need to put them in the Texas Constitution. And we've amended it many times. We amend it every single session. And I think this has definitely risen to the level of importance that we put this in the Texas Constitution, allow everybody the opportunity to vote, and make sure that we know that parents have those fundamental rights when making these determinations for their children.
Thank you for being with us today, Representative Dustin Burrows.
Thank you.
Well, this week's winter weather did more than just keep us home. A halt to progress at our state capitol and a mess across the state, might I add. We have a lot of catching up to do.